let's discuss RS here, and yeah, you guys saw the title. Rocks. Yep, that's right. Roll it.
In a time when Guthix was traveling the multiverse, he came across many unique lands and the inhabitants that occupied them. These worlds, often in situations of dire circumstance, led to the opportunity for Guthix to intervene and remedy the problems. But that wasn't the only thing. Guthix offered these races a place of refuge, a place of peace and hope, a place of new beginnings. Gielinor. In the 2017 Easter event, you could talk to a dwarf in the far western corner of the Dwarven Mines, who would give you a divine egg. Hidden within was a memory of Guthix on part of the origin story of the dwarves. It reads,
"They bore themselves with such solidity, such earthly strength, both within them as a people and with their actions. Where others might have considered them dour, I found them full of humor. What entranced me most about them, though, was their songs, long epic tales, remembered in detail through note and lyric. Amazing stories of their lives and their histories, but the troubles they faced. Their enemies risked the whole of their people. I could not save them, but I went to parley with those dark enemies, for all of us to be betrayed at the last moments of hope. And yet, still they stood with me, loyal to the last. I offered them then the chance to leave, and they left with me, rather than let all fall."
During the first age of Gielinor, the dwarves were most likely one of the first races brought to the lands alongside the other dominant peoples such as the humans and gnomes, and in doing so led to these groups spreading far and wide across Kandarin, further north to the Great Fremnik Seas, to the east and to the far south. In these times, the individuals were all surface dwellers, and as resources were gathered, trade routes established, and populations increased, so too did the skills that they possessed start taking form. With familiarity from their previous worlds, the dwarves and humans began digging into the earth in search of rare ores and minerals, and suddenly, in swaths, great quantities of copper, tin, and iron were being produced, and the foundations of some of Gielinor's greatest settlements started taking shape. With the advent of these metals, the quality of life began to surge within the walls of these establishments. New business ventures cropped up, governments established to expedite production, and maybe most importantly, the formation of troops and militia. In the Kandarin region, in the middle of the First Age, the Dwarven Black Guard managed to fend off an onslaught of goblin hordes to secure an incredibly key location we know today as the Coal Truck Mine, north of the Fishing Guild and west of Magruber's Woods. In these times, this was one of the most important outposts in all of Gielinor, shipping coal to make steel all across the region, issuing in sort of a early progressive era in Gielinor. Fast forward to the present day, in the humble abode of Doric the Dwarf, lives his son Boric, where adventurers highly skilled in mining may come across a document that they can give to him, detailing the many unique properties and uses of ores, and will complete the achievement titled Heavy Metal. To finish off the First Age and bring us into the Second Age, let's see what transpired over the course of those remaining years. In Boric's Big Book of Metal, the entries for Mithril and adamant reads as follows.
Mithril is a bluish-purple tinged metal, which is both stronger and lighter than steel. The early dwarves used mithril widely in their equipment and machinery. By the end of the First Age, they preferred the more durable adamant and used mithril almost exclusively for jewelry. Mithril is the strongest metal that humans can easily work because it can still be melted in primitive coal furnaces. Being rare on the surface, mithril was highly prized by the early Fremnik, and swords made of the material became valuable heirlooms. Adamant is a dark green metal which is only easily found deep underground. Extracting the metal from adamantite ore requires such high temperatures that the early dwarves were unable to make use of the material until they discovered luminite. Luminite, known to the humans as dwarven fire coal, is a partially magical rock which contains the essence of fire. Luminite is difficult to mine and work, but generates a flame far hotter than coal. Using luminite, the dwarves were able to smelt adamantite and found the metal even stronger than mithril and much heavier than steel. The dwarves quickly switched all of their industries over to make use of the new wonder material, and dwarven weapons were much sought after and traded to other races. The smelting and forging of adamant remained a dwarven secret until the early Second Age, when the clans that left the worship of Guthics to follow Saradomin revealed the properties of the two rocks to their non-dwarven allies. This caused a rift between the Guthixian and the Saradominist clans that lasted for thousands of years. When the Guthixian dwarves abandoned the surface during the God Wars, they were forced away from the best adamantite mines by the Saradominists, and their culture gradually reverted to the widespread use of steel.
As we can see from the reading that the dwarves were on the cutting edge constantly with the discovery and handling of new materials, and were extremely hesitant to relinquish their grasp until they themselves had a firm understanding of what they were working with. Even after that sect of dwarves who had fallen out of favor with Guthics and joined the Saradominists told their secrets to their non-dwarven allies, nothing would usurp the other dwarves' progress, as testing had already begun with a new ore. The book continues.
Runite, despite the name, has no direct connection to runes or runescence. While the strange, bright blue metal was known to early dwarves, they found the resulting metal weak and could find no use for it. In the Second Age, Saradominist dwarves searching for new sources of adamantite experimented by smelting the blue ore with luminite, and the results were fantastic. Despite being soft and deformable to a degree normally useless for making weapons and armor, properly refined rune metal, which has been smelted with luminite, projects a kind of invisible energy field around it. The energy field damages and disrupts anything that comes into sudden contact with it, which works superbly well both offensively and defensively. Attacks with rune weapons almost tear their opponents apart, while rune armor will deflect incoming blows from lesser materials like steel or mithril. The dwarves found the energy field too unstable to use in devices or as a power source, so the use of rune metal never spread beyond weaponry. Amongst Saradominists, it was the belief that the runes were the personal creations and gifts of their god. The properties of runite were so incredible that they believed it to have similar origin and named it for that reason. By the time they discovered that there was no relationship, the name had stuck.
And so once again, just as with mithril and adamant prior, rune weapons and armors became the primary choice for all adventurers courtesy of the dwarves for most of the Second Age. Nearing the back half of the Second Age, though, as the God Wars began to escalate, amidst the forces of the Zoroastrian Empire, the Ilyanka, the forces of Sardaman, the Dragonkin, and others, a new metal would take the stage in the unlikeliest of ways. The next entry in Boric's Big Book of Metal reads,
Orikalkum is one of the names for the hard, dark red metal used by the Dragonkin to make much of their equipment. Orikalkum is what the Saradominist dwarves called the metal, but the word is actually Icene in origin, as Icene was the official language of the Saradominists of the Second Age. The dwarves found small deposits of the metal on Gielinor, but at the time were unaware of its significance. Although Saradomin knew of the Dragonkin, he felt no need to share that information with his Gielinorian subjects. The ore, called Orikalkite, didn't react even to being smelted in the astonishing heat of luminite. It wasn't until an unrelated discovery later in the God Wars that they were able to make use of it. During the Second Age, many Iloquent had fought for the Zerosian Empire during its incredible expansion. These small lizardmen were powerful warriors because of their ability to control and ride fire-breathing dragons. The dwarves, always extremely attentive to mineralogical matters, noticed that the fire the dragons breathed would suddenly alter any rock it blasted. Seeming to trap the essence of the dragon fire within, the dwarves learned to coax the fire back out of the stone. The resulting flame was less powerful than luminite, but unmistakably tinged with the essence of dragon fire. They called the material Dracolith. They were never able to reliably produce it, as dragons were more or less impossible to capture or control, and were reduced to scavenging for small quantities of it where it occurred by accident. As the number of Iloquent dwindled, the material became scarcer and scarcer. Despite being less hot than luminite, experiments showed that the Dracolith flame was able to draw the metal forth from the Orikalkite ore. The resulting metal, which they named Orikalkum, was remarkable. It was tougher than adamant and no heavier than light steel. Two factors prevented its widespread distribution amongst the Ceredominists. Firstly, they only found vanquishingly small quantities of both Orikalkite ore and the Dracolith catalyst. Secondly, they considered the metal's deep red color to be ill-omened, preferring the bright blue of runite. What the Ceredominists of the God Wars never discovered was the true secret of working Orikalkum in the direct and controlled flame of a dragon. This technique, used by the Dragonkin in antiquity, created a purer and stronger metal, and was used in the creation of the legendary dragon armor and weapons.
As the God Wars escalated for centuries, all throughout the Third Age, it was the humans during the Fourth Age who unknowingly uncovered this next ore. One unlike all the ones to come before. This one was infused with magic. The text continues.
Necronium, like its predecessor Orikalkum, is forged from two ores, in this case, Necrite and its catalyst, Phasmatite. In the Third Age, when the conflict between the gods raged across the world unchecked for centuries, mortal casualties were beyond measure, though they must have counted in the hundreds of millions. Demons and other great monsters heaped bodies upon bodies in great mountains of the dead. The bones and blood and metal panoply of those ancient battlefields sank beneath the soil. Over the centuries, they coagulated in darkness and steeped into the residual magical energies. When the humans of the Fourth Age unwittingly disturbed these open-air charnel houses, they found new materials of remarkable strength. Necrite is a dark fusion of bone, Third Age metal, and ancient magics. The skulls of humanoids and larger, monstrous creatures protrude from the sickly green surface of this ore. In its presence, the skin crawls. Phasmatite is a pale greenish-white, powdery rock formed primarily of bone infused with ectoplasm, which burns with a brilliant green flame and a sound of distant screaming. When Necrite is heated in the flame of Phasmatite, it does not melt or sag, but rather stretches and rises as if straining for something. It forms itself into the plates and shapes of armor and weapons, though bizarre and misshapen. A skilled smith can guide and correct this process and create usable and extremely powerful equipment. The resulting Necronium has a dark green sheen and is still covered in the skulls and bones of the dead that grant it strength.
Moving into the Fifth Age brings us only more turmoil and confusion, more questions than answers, more dread than peace. I'm talking about the discovery of the ominous Bane ore. Let's listen in.
Bane. There is a creature in Fremnik legend more dangerous and terrifying than any other. Jormonger. A worm said to be so vast and ancient that he encircles the whole of Galanor. allegedly sleeps deep beneath the ground at the crown of the world. The stories call Jormungr the great worm of hatred, for he is said to bear such utter loathing for all other beings that his mere touch is lethal to everything that moves. The scholars of the Moon Clan believe Jormungr to be merely a myth, a tale told by their superstition kin. They believed this up until the 5th Age, when the explorers of the Basilic clan discovered a strange new ore along the north coast. This dark purple rock seemed to almost seethe with madness, and the Fremnant could not make use of it. They could smelt it, but no warrior wished to wield a weapon that filled their heart with dread, and they believed the metal cursed. They named it the Flesh of Jormungr and left it well alone. The scholars thought this a coincidence until several more deposits were discovered in the north, winding a sinuous pattern across the top of the world. Despite the grim omen, the Moon Clan could not unlock the secrets of the metal, nor could they find any other trace of an entity buried in the earth. Decades later, a powerful warrior named Koshi, who knew neither fear nor death due to the enchantment laid upon him, made a weapon from the flesh of Jormungr, a great axe named Balmung, for the slaying of Dagonoths and other threats. Koshi, who was wise in the way of magic due to a heritage he had forgotten, worked magic into the weapon as he wrought it, and the enchantment was completed later by an adventurer who slew many Dagonoths with the weapon. Once correctly tuned against the Dagonoths, the weapon's aura of dread disappeared, and it became extremely effective at slaying its chosen foe. Koshi later taught his technique to an itinerant dwarf visiting Rileka. The dwarves of Keldagram were horrified by samples of the metal which he had returned, and refused to allow into the city. The dwarven quarter of Falador was more tolerant, if not welcoming, and slowly the knowledge of bane metal spread to the smiths of that city.
Rounding out the final entries, we have both Elder Rune and Primal, both key contributors to the inner workings of Gielinor, and great examples of the rich history of rocks in the world of Runescape. The last two documents in Boric's Big Book of Metals reads,
Elder Rune is a rune bar reinforced with light and dark animica. Animica crystallizes over thousands of years at sites of significant concentrations of anima, usually the resting place of a dead god. A notable example is Tumikin's remnant, where the desert god Tumikin sacrificed himself at the end of the Caridian-Zerosian War. While the majority of Tumikin's energy gradually became one with the anima mundi of Gielinor, the lingering remnants of Tumikin's divine energy crystallized into light animica. Similarly, when Guthics banished the gods from Gielinor, the goddess of the elves, Seren, shattered herself into thousands of crystals to always be with her followers. Some of those crystals gradually melded with the rocks of the Elven lands, forming light animica. The most notable site of dark animica can be found in the empty throne room, where the empty lord Zeros was betrayed by his legatus Maximus, Zamorak. The dark power within Zeros was rejected by the anima mundi, and gradually manifested as crystals of dark animica. Primal is a light red metal forged from 10 ores originally found only in the dungeons of Daemonheim: Novite, Bathos, Marmaros, Cretonium, Fractite, Zephyrium, Argonite, Catagon, Garganite, and Promethium. These strange deposits originate in the lowest levels of the dungeon, but by some great power that can change, alter, and dare I say it, taint the physical properties of matter in this world, these warped resources steadily emerged on the upper levels. Daemonheim is an unstable space, constantly shifting and rearranging, and so it's inevitable that which lies below would eventually intersect the world above. Despite the best efforts of the Fremnant to contain this taint by forbidding the passage of items in and out of Daemonheim in recent years, isolated deposits of Daemonheim ore were discovered by prospectors in the wilderness. Though Argonlek was soft and inferior, providing negligible protection, this intrusion from the depths sparked an ill omen. Now, as if driven by some primal instinct to expand and conquer, and excavated by recent archaeological activity, the mineral deposits of Daemonheim have breached the surface of the peninsula, sparking an onrush of opportunistic miners in search of fortune.
So that's going to conclude the video, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Thank you to M with Z for reading the Divine Egg Memory. And be sure to follow him on Reddit and Twitter to stay up to date on all things Rs3 content. He works with a lot of the community and he's got some really great stuff out there. Thank you to EloquentSilence for reading Borik's Big Book of Metals, and make sure to catch her Runescape 3 streams on Twitch. And lastly, for the Bane ore, go ahead and check out more of Prideslayer 77's lore on how Bane ore relates to Zautok. All of their links will be down below. Runescape forever.